So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another council meeting. Today is March 22nd, 2021, and also we're fully into spring. That is right. On Friday, we had the first day of spring. As you can tell from outside, it's not quite as springy as was the week before. So if this is spring and last week was winter, I'd prefer to have winter back. But we can't change it and go back, so we're going to enjoy the spring that we have because it's always better in Stony Plain. Members of council and administration that are participating today, please make sure your mics are on mute. So also if you want to make a comment and speak, please text me so I have a speaking order. And please turn off your video to save bandwidth. If you like to turn your video on, you may when you're speaking or presenting. And then also our recording secretary will be counting the votes and lowering your hand so you don't have to do that later. Okay. With that, there is an agenda before you. Deputy Mayor, if we can have a motion, please.
Yes, Your Worship, the Town Council adopt the March 22nd, 2021 regular council meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Mr. Mayor, there's 7 hands in favor.
Okay, thank you much, Recording Secretary. Move on to number 3 of our agenda is the public input session. This is the time that we allow residents to talk to council about anything that's not on the current agenda. Since this is a virtual meeting, Town Manager, has anybody submitted anything to be read into the records?
Thank you, Your Worship. I've not been made aware that anyone wishes to have something on the record or attend the public input session.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to number 4, there is no presentations or delegations tonight. There's also no statutory public hearings. Moving on to the adoption of council minutes, the RCM of March 8th. Councillor Meyer, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The council accept the regular council meeting minutes from March 8th, 2021 as presented.
Thank you, Councillor. Members of council, you've had a chance to read it. Any errors or omissions through the minutes? Okay, I didn't see any either. Ladies and gentlemen, members of council, I apologize. I looked at some of the time stamps there. That when I said I gave you guys 10 minutes, actually it was not 10 minutes because I didn't set my timer and I was just going by, I usually judge a break and usually 10 minutes based on our town manager's ability to have a smoke. So usually he leaves, has a smoke, gets some water and comes back. Usually that's 10 minutes. And for some reason, last meeting he came back early, so I just thought it was 10 minutes was done, so I just called the meeting back to order. So my apologies. I'll be setting a timer to make sure that we're consistent with that. Okay, no more questions and comments. Moving on, I need to call the question. All those in favor? To accept for information. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, that's 7 hands in favor.
Thank you. Moving on to number 7 is Council Boards Committee and Commission meeting minutes. Councillor Matties, please.
That Town Council received the Council Boards and Committee meeting minutes for information.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. So, Councillor, it's 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3. So, any questions or comments regarding any 3 of those minutes? Okay, seeing none, I have a question to the representative of the Meridian Housing Foundation. Not really regarding the actual minutes itself, but with the fact that Wadman, the village of Wadman, kind of dissolved and folded back into Parkland County. As we're all aware, the Meridian Foundation was formed by the 4 municipalities, Stony Plain, Spruce Grove, Parkland, and the village of Wadman. With Wadman being out, does that affect the requisition that will be coming to the town of Stony Plain from the Meridian Housing Foundation?
No, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe it does. Wabanum's requisition will now just be sent to the County of Parkland. That's what I'm assuming. We haven't really discussed that.
Thank you. If you can provide some clarity once that is kind of earmarked and decided. Councillor Mattis, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just a question with regards to the land and office space purchase. Is there an update at all about for that?
May I proceed, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. No, there is no update at this time. We do have a board meeting this coming Thursday, and I'm sure we'll have an update at that time.
Thank you. Anybody else has any questions or comments regarding those minutes? Okay, see none, on call the question. All those in favor to accept for information.
Mr. Mayor, there's 7 hands in favor.
Okay, thank you very much. That's carried. Moving over to bylaws. There is nothing tonight. Moving to business items. Item number 9 is voting privileges. Go ahead, Town Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll have a few quick comments and I'll turn it over to our General Manager of Corporate Services. I believe we have a couple staff members here this evening that may speak to this. So what you have in front of you, Your Worship, and to the rest of Council is some background and a recommendation on what was essentially a relatively historical understanding as to the manner in which the town's appointees to these two boards conducted themselves when it comes to voting matters at both Parkland Pioneer Museum and the Heritage Agricultural Society, or maybe known a little bit underneath the Multicultural Center name. I'm going to stop there, Your Worship, and just turn it over to our General Manager of Corporate Services, who will speak further.
Thank you, Town Manager. I'll actually have the Manager of Legislative Services speak to this item as they've done the research. But I did just want to point out to Council there was a slight grammatical pencil mark within the package you received that did not go out to the public, and we apologize if that's the version that you received. But again, that did not go public, so apologize for that. And I would just pass it over to our Manager of Legislative Services to speak to this item further.
Thanks, General Manager, and good evening, Your Worship, and all members of Council. So we were asked to review the voting privileges for both the Stony Plain and Parkland Pioneer Museum Society and the Heritage Agricultural Society. And through that review, we primarily looked at the bylaws associated with the two societies, as well as the associated memorandums of agreement. So as you can probably see within your package, each of those bylaws do include some wording with respect to the expectations of the boards of directors, either in compiling of the board of directors or with respect to the directors voting. And when compared to the memorandums of agreement, there is a bit of a discrepancy between the bylaws and the expectations outlined in the memorandums of agreement. So as a result of that, we are recommending that the memorandums align with the respective bylaws and that both agreements with the respective societies be amended to allow for the council members that has been appointed to those boards to have those voting privileges during those meetings. So I'll leave it there, but we're certainly happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Members of Council, any questions of clarity before I accept the motion so we can debate and ask for questions and comments? Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if this has been discussed with these two boards, if they've had any input into this change that will happen to the memorandum of agreement if we decide to change it. Has there been any discussion with those particular boards?
Okay. Staff, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll maybe provide a bit of comment on there, and then certainly other members of the staff that that have further information could do so as well. This dialogue or this topic has come up over a number of times over the years. It's always been my impression that our two entities were of the mind that they would prefer if we were voting members, respected the notion that for some years we chose not to. And at worst, so to speak, or in the default position was that it didn't affect them directly. So that's my general understanding over, numerous conversations over the years. But I wouldn't say that administration at this point formally checked in with either of the groups to get a formal opinion, if you want to put it that way. I'll stop there, and maybe if my staff can correct me if we did, please correct me, but I don't believe we did formally.
Okay, thank you. Anybody from staff?
The town manager's statements were accurate, Your Worship. The only other piece that I would add is there's obviously other Parkland County council members also appointed to these boards who would be voting. So just alignment there with this recommendation as well.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Bennett, the answer would be no, but I think from what I hear from the answer as well is that this was been talked about for quite a few years, and they are aware, and it is written into their own bylaws that each board member has a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Deputy Mayor, you have a question or for clarity understanding?
Yes, please, and thank you, Mayor Choi. I thought, I'll back up. When I read these, they're both identical, except one says the Parkland Pioneer Museum, and the other one says the Heritage Agricultural Society. It was my understanding when we talked about this last, and when I sat on both those boards at the same time, that we were voting on one already, but not voting on the other. So I have not read their bylaws or anything like that. But it seems just a little strange to me that we would have two identical motions really in front of us at this particular point in time. Maybe they can clarify that from my understanding, and maybe it's a moot point. I really don't know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. And I believe when we appointed those members and agreed to join the boards, there was a motion passed that we were not voting members. Administration? Okay.
If I may just interject then and say it's a moot point now because that was a long time ago that I was on those boards. I know I voted on one but did not vote on the other. And I can't remember for the life of me which one I voted on. But I guess as long as this covers everything off, it's a moot point.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Councillor Meyer, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just quickly, just reviewing the notes here, it looks like we signed a memorandum of agreement with these boards just over a year ago. I'm just curious why at that time this issue wasn't addressed. I guess that's a question for administration.
Yes, administration.
Your Worship, so the long-standing, I guess, understanding was that the resolution or the direction from council has been that these would be non-voting positions. So when those things come up in any of the agreements, we would just go to the historical direction, which at that time was to continue that non-voting setup. Recently, there was some, was brought to our attention that there was maybe going to be another dialogue about it. So that's what we're in front of you, just to clarify once and for all the voting or not voting, frankly, at these two entities.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
And sorry, can I just have just a quick follow-up? if I could.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Meyer.
Well, I guess it's not really much of a follow-up to that question. Just for clarity regarding an earlier answer, am I correct? Parkland County does, their representatives do vote on these boards?
That is correct. When we both joined the boards, Stony Plain chose not to be a voting member, but to be participating in terms of debate, discussion, and everything, and not voting. We also participate in terms of financial contributions. We just felt at that time that we could have had the same say and same influence without actually having a vote on the board.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Pleshko, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to make a comment. I have sat as well on both of these committees, and my understanding when I first got on the Ag Society, we were allowed to vote. Soon to learn that we were not, and sitting on the Pioneer Museum one, there is not voting as well there. But I have had conversations on many occasions at both places, and I've always been asked, why is it that the town is the only one that doesn't? Both representatives on Parkland County that sit on those boards vote the same as they would any other member that's on those boards. And just for clarity, the multi is also a board that has a requirement of $50 to be a member on that. So we paid the $50, but we never had a say in anything that was related to that, but always appreciated our input from it. So again, I think this is just more of a comment than anything. It's when I mentioned it at the Heritage, the Pioneer Museum recently, the arms were open and they all stated that they felt it was time that Stony was part of it, as Parkland already was. So thank you.
Thank you for the update there, Councilor Plechko. Any other questions of clarity and understanding? I have a question just for clarity. Looking at the background information on page 31 of 99, to staff. Middle of the first paragraph, it states, as it pertains to the board of directors, the bylaw indicates that there will be 2 members appointed from each of the town of Stony Plain and Parkland County. So from my understanding of reading exactly what that sentence says, does that mean that we're allowed to appoint 2 people to the board?
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe I'll ask our Manager of Legislative Services to speak to that.
Thank you, Town Manager. Your Worship, that's an error, I would argue. It is 2 members, 1 from each of the town of Stony Plain and 1 from Parkland County.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions of clarity and understanding? Okay, see none. Councillor Laurie, you can make a motion, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move that the Town Council direct administration to 1, amend the Memorandum of Agreement with the Stony Plain and Parkland Pioneer Museum Society to ensure that the council representative appointed to the Board of Directors has voting privileges, and 2, amend the Memorandum of Agreement with the Heritage Agricultural Society to ensure that the council representative appointed to the Board of Directors has voting privileges.
Thank you, Mr. Councilor Laurie. Members of council, the floor is open for council's discussion, debate. Okay, I see nobody has messaged me. I will support the motions. I believe when we first agreed to join the boards, there was some conversation around the table about, just having just as much influence without a vote because of our standing in the community, our financial contribution, and our ability to kind of network and bring some ideas and kind of collaborate with both the Pioneer Museum and the Heritage Ag Society. That has been well over about 8 years now, so it is good to review that. And if council is willing to support this, then that will kind of show as our maturation into joining the boards more fully. But I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Mr. Mayor, there's 7 hands in favor.
Thank you, Recording Secretary. Moving on to information items and council discussion. We'll start with Councillor Bennett, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The one item that I wanted to bring to council's attention was it was an article in this past week's Stony Plain Reporter on page 9. And it was that the headline is the Tri-Region recognized in AHS case study about pandemic response. And the article went on to talk about our collaboration with Westview Health Center and our FCSS and some of the protocols that were put in place when the pandemic was first declared. And I thought it was very impressive that the Alberta Health Services is highlighting that the combined efforts of the City of Spruce Grove, the Town of Stony Plain, and Parkland County on the Westview Dementia Collaborative. And you know, it seems to me that if AHS can recognize the initiatives that we put forward, such as the Caring Community and Caring Hearts Connection, and the other programs that we initiated, that perhaps the Town of Stony Plain should also recognize that that those initiatives did happen, and that you know, AHS is considering that a study and congratulating us on those. So I wanted to highlight that this evening, especially because FCSS is now part of the town structure. I'm wondering if we could have a social media presence that kind of announces this this recognition from AHS.
Okay, thank you for bringing that to attention. Town Manager, anything to comment regarding that?
Thank you, Your Worship. I myself wasn't fully aware of the article, so we can take a look at that and see if it's something we can maybe build with or build on. I'll stop there, Your Worship. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman, for bringing that forward. Councillor Plechko.
Nothing this evening, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Meyer.
Sorry, did you say Councillor Meyer?
Yes, Councillor Meyer.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick one. I'm so glad that we put money aside in our towards maintaining our trails the prior week, because I was out for a jog, and anyhow, some of our trails are looking quite beat up. I can tell you the path that ends at the end of my street on 56th Avenue between the highway and my street. Anyhow, it was heaving in previous years. It's wonderful that the town came out and cleaned up the trees, but I think unfortunately the truck that drove on the path more or less just finished off what was remaining of that path, and now there's large chunks that the local kids are picking up and moving about. So just think I would make the admin aware of that one. I'm sure it's a tripping hazard. It would be good if we cleaned it up.
Thank you very much, Councillor Meyer, and that's appreciative. Again, if you can also send an email to our town manager, and that way we can have tracking and just forward it over to our public works as well.
Will do.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of things to mention and then a couple of questions for administration. So number one, I just wanted to mention, I know a lot of us have had the opportunity to, and I had an opportunity this weekend to host Councillor Wayne Roth on our beautiful paths here in the town and take him for a bit of a walkabout. So it was great getting the opportunity to show him a little bit of Stony Plain and talk about the way that our two communities are working together. We actually walked the entire rotary trail that's already been constructed in Stony Plain and kind of got the feel as to how it would be once it was able to connect down Boundary Road and to Grove Drive. So that was a great activity. Also just wanted to make a mention, I know our communications department has put some communications out about the ice conditions on our storm ponds. Just a reminder for our residents that those definitely are getting dangerous. I know there was some chatter on social media last week about some kids out, I believe it was on the Genesis pond. So obviously a very dangerous activity that I hope the message gets out loud and clear that should not be taking those type of risks right now. As for questions for administration, I'll ask both and then I'll give them the opportunity to respond to them. I do have questions around our mask bylaw. Understanding that we put in the mask bylaw because the province hadn't stepped forward to do so. Obviously, since that time, the province has stepped forward to do so. We're now in the midst of our kind of cooling off period of our bylaw, which would technically remove our bylaw, but with provincial health orders superseding us, the mask bylaw will still be in place. I'm just curious as to why we aren't just rescinding our mask bylaw and removing it completely at this time, given that we have a provincial health order in place to manage that and essentially, getting out of the business that we shouldn't be in respect to the health side of things. And then also I was wondering, I haven't seen any communications in regards to pitch in week this year and being out on the trails quite a bit, enjoying the weather. I do see that there is quite a bit of debris and garbage, a lot of shingles from the windstorm that we had. And just wondering if we are still doing pitch in week this year and when we can expect to see some communications and how community members can participate in that.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Laurie. So those two questions, Town Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe pitching week is proceeding as it generally has in the past. I think there's a couple different ideas about how that will roll out this year. I'll maybe just ask our General Manager of Planning and Infrastructure if he can add anything further to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, Town Manager, the pitch-in week is proceeding. It is typically held the last week of April, and we are formulating our plans for that time period again this year.
Thank you.
Yeah, Your Worship, and then maybe I'll speak a little bit to the mask bylaw, and then our General Manager of CAPS can perhaps supplement or clarify if I misspeak. So Your Worship, to the rest of Council, as Councillor Laurie noted, many municipalities around about last late summer, early fall, I guess, went ahead with municipal mask bylaws, face covering bylaws across the province of Alberta. Specifically within the metro region, I believe, by the, after at least within a few months, I think most, if not all of the metro region municipalities had some form of mask bylaw in place. Again, without going into all of the specific detail, they were similar in some ways, different in others. Some had hard dates where they were either lapsed or were to be renewed by. Others had some form of a trigger mechanism, which would put them in place or have them come out of that, or lapse, I guess would be the easiest word I'll use for now. At this point in time, I believe across the metro region, there's a bit of a scattered effect. Just as recently as this past Friday, in some conversations, there were some municipalities still had theirs in place and intended to leave it in place for various reasons. Others had just allowed theirs to, those ones that had a hard date, I believe, most of those ones basically allowed theirs to lapse, I guess is the easiest way to put it. So they would, in effect, not have a municipal mask ban bylaw in place. In a very broad or contextual overview, I guess I'll say, because frankly, Your Worship, this is pretty specific topics and pretty specific indications. Our mask that bylaw trigger effect was through the designation of a watch designation by the province of Alberta. And I mean, that watch designation was triggered by certain numbers, as well as the province could just put it on through their public health orders, I believe. Ours and Spruce Groves were both triggered through the watch designation. Province of Alberta has in some ways gone away from that designation specifically, but believes it remains in place. Ours could be, is under a bit of a subject of interpretation as to, how, when, what, is it on or is it off, frankly. And we've done some work on that, Your Worship, for sure, but have not taken it to what we would consider an end point, at which time we would be in the chambers making recommendations specifically. I'm going to stop there, Your Worship. Certainly if the General Manager has anything to add a little bit further, but I would say a fairly big question with a lot to it, and I'll just stop there.
Yes, thank you, Town Manager. And if Council recalls the bylaw that Council passed for the mandatory mask bylaw was it would be enacted once we became on the watch list, and when we became off the watch list, it would be still in effect for 21 days after. And then at that time, then the mask bylaw would lapse and just then the bylaw is no longer valid at that point in time. But once we're put back on the watch list, then it becomes active again, and the same cycle goes through again. The beautiful thing about this bylaw was that Council was forward-thinking enough to build in a clause in there that says once the pandemic is over, the bylaw automatically is rescinded. So Council does not have to do anything. Council did all the hard work and the conversation and the debate to make sure that our community is safe and ready for this. And when the pandemic has been officially removed, the mask bylaw is automatically rescinded. So therefore, Council is fully, done its due diligence to make sure that it's already in place already. So, Councillor Lori, unless you want to make it earlier, I would suggest that the bylaw that Council have passed unanimously is still good and it should stay.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yeah, as I mentioned, the cooling off is actually 14 days, not 21. That's in our bylaw. And I agree. I think we were very forward thinking, and I think it was prudent of Council to action when we did take action. However, we took action because of the province's inaction. The province has since fulfilled their mandate in respect to controlling health. And again, that's outside our municipalities, what should be our municipalities' responsibilities. And so I find in talking with residents that there's still a lot of confusion out there about the mask bylaws and how do they apply and when do they apply. And, as you mentioned, our mask bylaw has certain provisions in it, but frankly, those provisions don't matter as long as the province has something in place, because the provincial government supersedes the municipal government. So I'm just kind of wondering what the purpose would be even to allow it to continue to exist, because allowing it to continue to exist just adds another layer of complexity and confusion when residents are trying to understand and make sense of what the restrictions and requirements, et cetera, are. I've had several residents say to me already, oh, great, Stony Plains cases are low. That means our masks are going away right away, correct? And I have to explain to them that no, unfortunately, even though after 14 days of being out of the watch, the town of Stony Plains bylaw is not in effect, the provincial bylaw or the provincial laws and provincial health orders supersede the town of Stony Plains, therefore face masks are still in effect. And the question that I get is, well, then why does Stony Plain have one? And so I believe that what we are doing with this bylaw now is creating confusion between the provincial health orders and our local bylaws and which applies when and to who. And therefore, I don't feel that it's value that we continue this. So I would be interested in seeing if this should come back to chambers or not. But I am one voice, so I would encourage my other members of council, if they're getting the same questions or if they have the thoughts, that maybe it's something we need to bring forward.
That's a good comment. Again, I had a few of these questions and conversations as well. It also it goes back to the point of what you said earlier, causes confusion. Can you imagine the headlines if we did actually come back and we removed our mask bylaw, and that gets spread over our social media and the newspaper, and then that is directly in contradiction of what the provincial bylaw says, right? Like, because we don't have a bylaw, they have one, so that might add more confusion than just leaving it. But that's a conversation that maybe council can have at a later date.
Looks like the general manager has his hand up, so I'm assuming he has some information for us on it.
Okay, general manager.
All right, Your Worship, just to supplement with the CAO, not anything in addition to the CAO, and just another contemplation or perspective point is the fine under the provincial health order right now is $1,000. Ours is not $1,000. So there's a discrepancy between the CPOs currently at this point have two options to levy a fine related to our masking bylaw or a provincial health order. If we didn't have our own bylaw in play at this point, we would simply be under the auspice of the provincial health order, which has a larger fine levy. So that's one perspective to consider. And in addition to the town manager at this point, there could be confusion with respect to not having a bylaw, and then we have to do continual updating to the community with respect to there still is a provincial mandate. So sometimes the messaging about we do have a bylaw, it is in place. It removes the larger message about provincial because some people do contemplate and consider that each jurisdiction has the ability to guide their own enforcement or restriction levels within their own community, and that sometimes is not the case. But there can be more confusion about localized enforcement and restrictions versus provincial-wide enforcement and restrictions.
Thank you for that. And I think that answers the two questions that Councillor Lowry had.
Yeah, it does, Your Worship. Thank you very much. Just wanted to pass on my kudos as well through the general manager and the town manager to SPFD for their great work at the Ironstone Terrace fire this weekend. It was nice to see. I believe we even got an email update with some specific times. It looks like it was very quickly actioned and very quickly had the emergency well under control. So pass along our kudos through the management to them.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Lowry. And General Manager, please pass along our congrats and thanks to the Stony Plain Fire Department. Moving over, Councillor Matthews, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple of things with regards to what Councillor Meyer had said regarding the trails. I walked today before the council meeting, and on the V going into High Park or would separate and go on to Highway 628 onto the trail there is a huge root. I mean, it looks like the size of a tree, huge root that I had to kind of step over. And then there's another big bump in front of it, which I kind of ended up slipping a bit on it. So there's definitely a hazard there. We need to get that fixed. So I'd really appreciate if somebody could take a look at that. Secondly, I too had the opportunity to walk with Councillor Wayne Roth on Thursday of last week. And we were fortunate, we all got to pick the places that we wanted to go. And I selected Genesis on the Lake in Westera. And what was wonderful about that, you know, it's just a beautiful, beautiful area. And then what happened was the day after, we got a message back from Councillor Roth and said, wow, he says, we don't have anything like that in Spruce Grove. And so I contacted my client today, and I just wanted to share the compliment with him, and he was so pleased about that. So I wanted to share that with council today that, I mean, this means a tremendous amount that we are out in the community, and I'm so thankful for Councillor Roth inviting us to do that in our own community, so that was great. One other topic that I'd like to discuss is briefly is culture and tourism. I had a little bit of time to do a review after we had a presentation on Friday with regards to the Stony Plain Tourism Master Plan. This was a plan that came out of the Mayor's COVID-19 Economic Task Force. I understand in that it was consultant-led in an engagement process. And we ended up, there's some very good elements in this tourism master plan, and it's going to be presented to council in May of 2021. I then went on to take a look at what we had on a website for the tri-region tourism. And it looks like, for example, it wasn't updated since 2018, 2019. And so we had some questions. And I know that, of course, with the tri-region plan or the regional plan that's coming up, that tourism will be discussed there. But what I'd like to talk about is the comments that the consultant had made regarding the tourism master plan, and suggesting that the town should likely continue to lead tourism in Stony Plain over the near future. But what I would like to be able to do, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I just heard a disruption there. So that it talked about the town continuing to lead with that. But what I have kind of done is taken a look at what he had addressed after that, said that potentially maybe a chamber or an association might be able to look at tourism, leading tourism in the future. So I looked at the Cochrane Tourism Association, and basically it's a destination marketing organization for Cochrane. And I went to their website, and it's absolutely amazing. It's number one, starts with Cochrane. It's a feeling. And then it says on the second page, let's celebrate Cochrane, fun ahead, it says. And then on the third page, it says, the sign says, we are open and safe. And then it goes through and talks about the month of March and all the different events they have. For example, March 8th, they had International Women's Day, and they were celebrating various businesses in Cochrane related to women and the Cochrane Public Library. Then they had on March 9th, the National Meatball Day, and they were featuring some of the restaurants in the community. They had a Lip Appreciation Day, again, referring to businesses in the community. And finally, well, there was many others, but National Cocktail Day. I didn't take a good look at what that was, but my point is that I do believe that our culture and tourism department is critically important for town initiatives, et cetera. And I think we need an officer and probably, a support individual there. But I would love to see us look in the future as to what an association, engaging the community and really leveraging on what we have right now, so we could build for the future as a way that we can move forward out of COVID-19 and back into a really resilient, strong community.
That's great. Thank you for that. That's great feedback, and bring that to council. As you mentioned, something for us to look forward to, and as a council decide the direction of that tourism for our own growth. So thank you, Councilor Matthews. Deputy Mayor, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I just have a couple of items that I'd like to ask. The library opening, I think I saw a date for it, but I can't seem to locate that now. So I was wondering when that is, and what are we going to do about this? I know myself, and I've seen several other councillors and yourself, Mayor, promoting it on our individual Facebook pages and stuff like that. And I've had replies back from other councillors, other jurisdictions, wanting to, or indicating that they're anxious and excited to see it, to view it, because it's the envy of all the area here. And I'm just wondering if we have plans to include some, or we'll never get them all, but the other councils there. And secondly, I sent to the CAO several days back, the railway crossing on Golf Course Road as you're heading north on the inside lane. There's, I believe, a piece missing. You really have to slow down to about 5 kilometers an hour to go over it, and just wanting to know if there's anything being done with CN on that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And yes, again, this is spring, and lots of issues with the road crossings, the at-grade crossings with CN. I know exactly what you're talking about because I've driven over that a couple times, and it does seem like there's a big drop off right after the tracks there. Town manager or the general manager of infrastructure and planning.
Your worship, it's town manager here. So yeah, the CN track crossing, I believe that was provided to our general manager of planning and infrastructure, which we typically push forward over to CN. And I will ask him quickly if he's heard anything from CN.
Thank you, Town Manager. We did reach out to CN. That this is the second time we've reached out to them in that crossing. Once last November and again just recently. So we will continue to ask them to address that situation.
Your worship, if I can comment a bit now just on the Stony Plain Public Library. So yes, I think I mean a short answer is that you know, we will. I think we all need to really realize and appreciate just what a gem we have now for a public library, and it will form part of our I would say ongoing hosting plans, if you want to call it that, as we move forward. Again, understanding that although we are essentially the owners of the building, the Stony Plain Public Library sets most of the operations side of that. But you know, I think there is some merit that you know, moving forward, it's an opportunity to host different aspects of our community in there, to allow them to see it, to understand what's in there and what they can do. So I would, along those lines, receptions with realtors or people from the development industry, I could see having that. Again, when it's allowed, when we're able to do so safely. I think that's something that'll help get the word out and just show it off. Your worship, the other thing I think that I mean I would put forward to council is that the notion of the way it came together, you know, with the residential above, and you know, I mean, all of the project itself has already garnered some attention. I know I've been contacted by counterparts from in Alberta and frankly beyond about, you know, how did that work? How did you make that happen? And so on and so on. I know that it's a project that would probably make a really good case study at conferences for you know, I mean, library development and downtown development and cultural diversity development, all of those sorts of things. So, you know, I mean, that library for a number of years, but certainly now is a great story to tell. And I do think it's important that I mean, we'll all be able to tell it in certain ways at different times moving forward.
Thank you, Town Manager. And exactly, that's great comments. That the project that we have in our downtown with Three Robins and Library is just work of collaboration, working with the private sector, the communities, library, and town Stony Plain to get a project done that not only does it help with the economic development in our town, helps with the cultural aspect of the town, and it also provides a new location as a community hub for residents. I think that was it from Deputy Mayor. So just one council information is, again, this is spring and our public works are out there doing some street cleaning. So please, if you see them, please be patient. They are going as fast as they can. Well, they should be going that fast to make sure that the roads are clean. So again, if you need if you're in a hurry and there's somebody in front of you, please find an alternate route and be courteous to public works staff. Thank you. And that ends council information and council discussion. So moving into closed meeting. So again, closed meeting is when we go in and discuss things that are kind of privy to members of council. There's no motions made in closed session except for the motion to come out. If you look on your screen, there is a email address for anybody that is watching that would like to be notified when council comes out of closed session. And if you do, we'll wait until you come back to join us live on YouTube before we continue the rest of our meeting. With that, Council Pletchko, please have a motion to go into closed session, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, that council move into closed session to discuss per FOIP section 21, 12.1 Collaborative Economic Development Memorandum of Understanding.
Thank you very much, Council Pletchko. All those in favor?
Mr. Mayor, with 7 hands in favor.
Okay. Thank you. And before we actually go into a full closed session meeting, we'll take a 5-minute break. We'll allow staff that are not supposed to be in there to leave, and then allow us to get ready. So 5 minutes. So 5:55, please. Right, welcome back to our council meeting. Just come out of closed session. The only motion that was made was by Councilor Pletchko to come out of closed session, and that was passed 7-0. Administration, we put up a email address earlier for anybody that wanted to be notified of when council came out of closed session. Has anybody submitted a request to be notified?
Your worship, there's been no notifications.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we can move on to number 13 of our agenda, which is adjournment. Again, thank you, administration, for providing the package for us, and members of council for reading your agenda packages and coming ready for conversation, debate, and discussion. Appreciate it. Great work, everybody. And that is a wrap for the meeting. So the meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Good night.